Deep inside the operational command center of India's Northern Army Command, buried 3 stories beneath reinforced concrete in the military cantonment of Udhampur at exactly 06:15 local time on April 24, 2026, Lieutenant General Vikram Singh Rathore, the commander of India's Northern Theater, was reviewing satellite imagery that had arrived 17 minutes earlier from a raw intelligence relay station in Ladakh. According to operational reports being discussed across South Asian defense circles, the imagery showed something that Indian military planners had feared for over a decade, but had never seen confirmed with this level of clarity. China had completed the final phase of construction on the Motuo Mega Dam on the Yarlung Sangpo River, the massive Himalayan waterway that flows east across the Tibetan Plateau before plunging through the world's deepest gorge, crossing into Indian territory and becoming the Brahmaputra, the lifeline of 200 million people in northeastern India and Bangladesh. The dam's reservoir, visible in the satellite frames as a dark blue scar across the brown Tibetan terrain, had begun filling. The general had just enough time to reach for the red secure telephone on the left side of his desk before the next set of images arrived, showing something worse. The downstream flow gauges at Pasagat, India's first major monitoring station on the Brahmaputra after the river crosses the border, were registering a 23% reduction in water volume compared to the seasonal average. The river that feeds the rice paddies, the drinking water systems, the fisheries, and the spiritual identity of 200 million human beings was being quietly, steadily, systematically strangled at its source. What does China's dam mean for India's water security? How much control does China now have over the flow of the Brahmaputra? What military options does India possess to challenge a dam built on sovereign Chinese territory? And what happens to 200 million people if the water stops flowing? Stay with us because this is the conflict that nobody is watching and everyone should be. If you want analysis that goes where mainstream coverage will not, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Water is the one resource that cannot be substituted, cannot be synthesized at scale, and cannot be survived without for more than 72 hours. Every other strategic resource, oil, gas, minerals, food, has alternatives, workarounds, reserves. Water has none. The Brahmaputra River, known as the Yarlung Sangpo in Tibet, originates at an altitude of over 5,000 meters near the sacred Mount Kailash and flows approximately 2,900 kilometers before emptying into the Bay of Bengal through the world's largest river delta. It carries an average annual flow of approximately 687 billion cubic meters of water, making it one of the most voluminous rivers on Earth. In India's northeastern states, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Nagaland, the Brahmaputra is not merely a river. It is the economic, agricultural, ecological, and cultural foundation of life. Over 30 million people depend directly on the river for drinking water. Over 60 million depend on the floodplain agriculture it sustains. The fisheries support millions more. A sustained 23% reduction in flow would devastate rice production across Assam, trigger drinking water emergencies in cities that have no alternative supply, destroy fisheries, accelerate the salinization of the downstream delta in Bangladesh, and create a humanitarian crisis affecting populations measured in the tens of millions. China's dam at Motuo is a hydroelectric project with a planned generating capacity of 60,000 megawatts, which would make it the largest single power station on Earth, roughly 3 times the capacity of the Three Gorges Dam. The dam sits approximately 35 kilometers upstream of the Indian border, at the point where the Yarlung Sangpo makes its dramatic U-turn through the Yarlung Sangpo Grand Canyon, the deepest canyon on Earth, dropping over 2,000 meters in elevation across a distance of approximately 150 kilometers. The engineering is audacious. The strategic implications are terrifying, because a dam of this scale, positioned at this location, gives China the physical ability to regulate, reduce, or in a crisis scenario, temporarily halt the flow of the Brahmaputra into India. Not through a military operation, through a valve. The most consequential weapon in the emerging Sino-Indian rivalry is not a missile, not a fighter jet, not a submarine. It is a concrete wall built across a river at 5,000 meters above sea level, controlled by engineers in Beijing who can turn a dial and create a humanitarian catastrophe in India without firing a shot. The military dimension of this crisis is constrained by geography and nuclear deterrence in ways that make conventional military options essentially impossible. The dam is located in Tibet, approximately 1,200 kilometers from the nearest Indian military base, capable of launching a significant air operation. Indian Air Force Su-30 MKI fighters, the backbone of India's air superiority fleet, have a combat radius of approximately 1,500 kilometers with external fuel tanks, which would allow them to reach the dam site, but with minimal time over target and no margin for evasive maneuvering against China's air defense systems deployed along the Tibetan Plateau. The HQ-9B air defense batteries positioned at Chinese military installations in Tibet have engagement ranges of 200 kilometers, creating a defensive bubble around the dam that Indian aircraft would have to penetrate through. The BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, India's most capable precision strike weapon, has a range of approximately 450 kilometers in its latest variant, insufficient to reach the dam from Indian-controlled territory without forward basing in Arunachal Pradesh, which itself is within range of Chinese PHL-03 multiple rocket launchers deployed across the line of actual control. And above all else, both nations are nuclear-armed states. An Indian military strike against infrastructure on Chinese sovereign territory would constitute an act of war against a nuclear power, triggering an escalation dynamic that no rational decision-maker in New Delhi or Beijing wants to initiate. India's options are therefore not military but diplomatic, economic, and institutional. India has proposed an international treaty governing the use of transboundary rivers, modeled on the Indus Waters Treaty that has governed water sharing between India and Pakistan since 1960. China has rejected every proposal. China has not signed any international treaty governing the shared use of the rivers that flow from the Tibetan Plateau into downstream nations. China's position, stated through diplomatic channels, is that the development of rivers within Chinese territory is a matter of Chinese sovereignty and is not subject to international negotiation. This position, applied consistently, gives China unilateral control over the water supply of approximately 2 billion downstream users across India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, whose rivers, the Brahmaputra, the Mekong, the Salween, the Irrawaddy, all originate on the Tibetan Plateau. In Washington, the Brahmaputra crisis has received almost no attention because American strategic focus is consumed by the Taiwan Strait, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, Ukraine, and the Korean Peninsula. The water conflict between the world's two most populous nations, a conflict with the potential to affect 2 billion people, does not register on the American strategic radar because it does not involve American military assets, American allies, or American economic interests in a direct and immediate way. In Moscow, Russia monitors the Sino-Indian water dispute as a structural factor that prevents a durable reconciliation between China and India, a reconciliation that would threaten Russian interests by creating an Asian power bloc that could rival Russia's own partnerships with both nations. In Beijing, the dam is framed as a domestic energy project, a clean power initiative consistent with China's climate commitments. The strategic implications are not discussed publicly. They do not need to be. The dam speaks for itself. In Dhaka, Bangladesh faces the most acute consequences of any downstream nation. The Brahmaputra enters Bangladesh as the Jamuna and joins the Ganges-Padma system to form the world's largest river delta, a delta that is home to over 160 million people. A sustained reduction in Brahmaputra flow would accelerate saltwater intrusion into the delta, contaminating freshwater aquifers, destroying rice paddies, and displacing millions of subsistence farmers. Bangladesh has no leverage over China and no military options. It has only India, which is itself a downstream victim. In Hanoi, Vietnam monitors the Brahmaputra case as a precedent for its own dispute with China over the Mekong, where Chinese dams have already reduced downstream flows by measurable and damaging amounts. First, China has achieved upstream water control over the Brahmaputra through infrastructure rather than military force, creating a strategic lever that can impose catastrophic consequences on 200 million downstream users without any military action whatsoever. Second, India's military options are constrained to the point of practical impossibility by distance, geography, Chinese air defenses, and nuclear deterrence. Third, the absence of any international treaty governing transboundary river use from the Tibetan Plateau gives China de facto unilateral control over water resources that sustain approximately 2 billion people across South and Southeast Asia, a concentration of strategic power that has no parallel in modern history. Fourth, the water weapon is the ultimate asymmetric tool. It is defensive in legal terms, catastrophic in practical terms, and completely immune to the military countermeasures that define great power competition in every other domain. The old wars were fought over oil, over territory, over ideology, over the right to control shipping lanes and military bases and the machinery of industrial power. The new wars will be fought over something more fundamental, more irreplaceable, and more existentially necessary than any commodity the old world ever contested: water. The river that flows from Tibet into India carries not just water, but the survival of 200 million human beings who drink from it, eat from it, and live alongside it in a relationship as old as civilization itself. China has placed its hand on the valve. India has no tool to remove it. And the world, distracted by louder conflicts in louder places, has barely noticed that the most consequential strategic competition of the 21st century is not being fought with missiles or warships. It is being fought with concrete, with turbines, and with the silent, relentless power of gravity, pulling water downhill from the roof of the world into fields that may go dry. What do you think India should do? Is there any realistic way to counter China's upstream advantage? Or has the water weapon already won the war before the first shot was fired? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this analysis opened your eyes, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Until next time, stay sharp.